Blasphemous is a Metroidvania-style game that was released back in 2019 here in the US. And it's a Metroidvania hack-and-slash style game that follows a 2D sprite-based format, has a ton of action, and a pretty intriguing story. But the main thing about Blasphemous is that today it goes for over $180 on the second-hand market. At least the physical version does. The strange thing is that Blasphemous 2, which actually improves on some of the gameplay, the weaponry, some of the action, still goes for only $29 today. And it begs the question, what makes some video games shoot up in price and in value, and what makes other games that are even identical in some ways to these expensive games just stay at their normal standard MSRP? And that's one of the things that I kind of want to talk about today because this is a big part of the reason that a lot of people suffer from FOMO, especially when it comes to new video games that come out. Because the fear is that if you don't buy a video game as soon as it comes out, you then try to go back and buy it, let's say a year, 2 or 3 years later, you're now going to have to pay a crazy premium to get the game physically. And if you're a physical collector, this could pose a really huge problem. Another example would be the Stranger Things game on the PlayStation 4. Now, Stranger Things 3, the game, came out not that long ago either. I want to say within the last 5 years or so. So it's not like an older retro game. And of course, it follows the story, the very popular Netflix series Stranger Things. But this is kind of like an isometric beat 'em up style game where you can play as a number of different characters. But that's not the main thing. The main thing is that Stranger Things 3 is now commanding, for some odd reason, over $300 on the secondhand market. Now, I have not seen it sell for that price. I typically see this game sell for anywhere between 130 and 150 bucks. But even still, these are not older retro games. These are fairly new, modern games. And when we think about really expensive video games, we typically think about the games that are older, the games that, are retro, games that you can hardly find anymore. Now, again, this is what begs the question, what makes a game valuable? What's going to determine whether or not a game is going to be worth a lot of money in the future? And we're not doing this so that we can know which games to invest in. We're doing this because we want to know which games we should buy before they skyrocket in price. And there's a number of factors that cause, I think, certain games to get to these crazy prices. And that's kind of what I want to talk about today, in hopes that I can help someone who's trying to determine which games they should pick up now. And I'm not talking about retro games, I'm talking about modern games. Which modern games should they pick up now so that they don't have to pay the extremely high prices in the future? And, history always has a way of repeating itself. It always does. If we take a step back for a second and put the modern games aside, and even if we look at these two games here, these are two games that released on the PlayStation 2. One is Blood Will Tell, the other is Seven Samurai. Both were released in 2004. One was published by Sammy Studios, the other Sega, but they're both pretty much samurai-style hack-and-slash games. The biggest difference in story is that Seven Samurai is set in this futuristic city where you're basically battling cyborg-like humanoids. Those are your enemies in this hack and slash fighting game. Actually a hack and slash adventure game, and it's unique in that you can choose a number of different fighting styles. It has different weapons, and it's a very broad game. I think there's 40 or so levels in this game. Very interesting game. When it comes to Blood Will Tell, it's not set in a futuristic city. It's actually set in what looks like a historic type of Japan setting here, where the main character in this game, basically his body parts were dispersed and basically divided up among 48 demons. And so he has to go through and travel. This is a hack and slash adventure game. He's basically traveling throughout the land, locating every demon, all 48 demons, and each time he defeats a demon, he gets a body part back. So like in the beginning of the game, everything is in black and white because he doesn't have his eyes. So he has to defeat a demon. Once he gets his eyes back, now he can start to see in color. Once he gets certain different body parts back, as he gets his body parts back, he starts to level up. until he gets his body parts back, he has these prosthetic body parts. Like his arms, one of his arms is a blade. Well, I think both of his arms are blades. One of his kneecaps is a rocket. I think one of his hands is like a machine gun. It's very, very unique game. But both games came out at the same time. Graphically, they're not that much different. They really don't look that much different graphically. Gameplay wise, they do play a little bit different just because this one has kind of like run and gun shooter elements to it with some of the weapons that the main character has. But the biggest difference in these two games isn't necessarily the story or anything like that, but it's the price. Blood Will Tell can range anywhere from $350 to $400, while Seven Samurai might be a $25 to $35 game. And there are a couple things that I think set this game or set these games apart from what I can tell. One, I think, is the intricacy of the stories. Seven Samurai, while it is an interesting story, it's a very common story. It's something that you see, a futuristic city, hack and slash, things like that. Whereas Blood Will Tell, the story is a lot more deep. I don't know if I've ever really heard of another game where a dude lost 48 pieces of his body to 48 demons and he has to go and beat them all to get his body parts back. That's a very unique type of story that I think that in and of itself is intriguing. Also, while yes, the fighting and the battle system in Seven Samurai is dynamic, it's not nearly as dynamic as it is in Blood Will Tell, in that you really have to use different weapons to defeat different enemies at different stages of the game, which is why you're armed with like a rocket launcher in your kneecap. You have a machine gun in another part of your body. You have blades that you can use. And then on top of that, you also, in Blood Will Tell, you're also paired up with NPC that you can actually give commands to, and they can do things in the game on your behalf, which adds a whole nother element of intricacy to the game. And I think at some point there is a two-player option where you can actually have someone play as that helper. I can't remember. It's been a while since I've played Blood Will Tell. I played a lot of Blood Will Tell over the holidays. But the point of the matter is, I think what separates these two is the intricacy of the gameplay and the depth of the story. Now, I don't know how much more rare Blood Will Tell is from Seven Samurai. They both came out at the same time, and I don't know if one game got a higher print run than the other. But I would have to say that I probably see Seven Samurai in the wild just about as often as I do see Blood Will Tell. So just from the eye test, I really couldn't say that Blood Will Tell is a lot more rare than Seven Samurai, other than the fact that it's probably a lot more desirable because people want that type of game in their library. Now, I have noticed that a lot of horror games, games that deal with demonic things, for some reason are always really expensive. Someone go figure that out. I don't know why. Like, the Silent Hill games are really expensive. The Shadow Hearts games are expensive. Like, everything evil and demonic is always really expensive. And Blood Will Tell, while the main character isn't necessarily demonic, the plot of the game is demonic, right? In a way, it actually, you have to fight 48 demons. So that to me is also something interesting that I notice as well. And I think that is the big difference. This one has more of a dark undertone to it with a complex story, complex gameplay, unique attributes, while this one is a very surface level action hack and slash style game with a very surface level story to it. And I think that's what separates these two. Now, when you look at going back to like a Blasphemous, right? When it comes to Blasphemous, the same can be said. Now, there are a lot of hack and slash games that have come out on the Switch. You've got Moonscars, you've got The Last Faith, you've got Death's Gambit, you've got the Bloodstained series, you've got a number of hack and slash style games. More are coming to me. Elderbrand, Gal Guardians, right? A lot of these Metroidvania style games, but the thing that Blasphemous has that those games don't have, again, similar to Blood Will Tell, is a very deep and intricate story. The Penitent one. First of all, just think about that. The Penitent one. There's not many games where the main character is referred to as the Penitent one. And all of the religious and dark undertones, the very almost jarring images that you see in this game of, and for a 2D sprite-based game, it's extremely graphic for a 2D game. Like, I couldn't imagine what this game would look like if they rendered it in 3D. But it's very dark. It has that same dark, almost demonic slash angelic because it does pull from a lot of scriptural references. But the story is extremely intricate. And then again, here we come back to very intricate gameplay. The amount of different power-ups that you get. You can equip your sword with a ton of different attributes that unlock different things throughout each level, that give you foresight, that allow you to access different levels and different areas, had you not had those attributes equipped to your sword, the different power-ups and magic spells that you can perform. And that's just on top of all of the standard stuff like increasing your health and increasing your magic ability and all of that stuff. I think the intricacy here is really what drives this one and kind of sets it apart from other games. And I think if you're collecting and you're looking for games and you have a particular genre that you're into, I would say look for the games that have a compelling story. Look for games that have a very intricate story. Look for games that are deep and not very surface level and don't look like they're just trying to copy everything else. Blasphemous, while yes, we've seen Metroidvanias before, we've never seen one done quite like this, and we've never seen one executed quite like this. And you might say, well, Y2K, if it's so great, why did part 2 not do as well? Well, it's because it's part 2. The same thing happens in sneakers. When the original Chicago Air Jordan 1 released, or we don't even have to go back to the original, but if you look at the price of, let's say, a Chicago Air Jordan 1, which is a very common Air Jordan 1, by the way, that shoe has been re-released at least 5 times in history. 5 times. But a lot of people refer back to the 2015 version. And they revere that version because in the minds of a lot of people, that was the version where Nike got it right. And that version is like $1,000+. Now, they recently released the Lost and Founds like within the last 5 years, and that's another version of the Chicago 1. And even though in a lot of ways, I think it looks even better than the 2015 version, to many people, the 2015 version is kind of like it's the OG, it's the original, and you can't beat the original. And so the same thing goes with Blasphemous. Because Blasphemous 1 was the original, and of course the limited run version does go for a little bit more, that's just going to stick in the minds of people. And the same thing with Stranger Things. Now, Stranger Things kind of leveraged a little bit of a cheat code. Stranger Things 3, the game, isn't an original video game story, but it does play on a Netflix series that's extremely engrossing to a lot of people. A lot of people love Stranger Things, and I remember for the first like 3 seasons, I didn't care about Stranger Things. I was like, man, this show just looks like another show that's trying to play on like 80s tropes and 80s themes and things like that. And it wasn't until the pandemic came in that I actually sat down and like watched it. I was like, dang, this show is actually really good. That's, Millie Bobby Brown did her thing. And I think they do a good job of taking a very popular show and turning it into a very interesting game. They didn't turn it into like this slow-paced RPG. They didn't make it like a side-scrolling beat 'em up, which would also have been generic. But putting this isometric type of beat 'em up take on it with RPG elements, I think allows more depth to go into this game. And I think that's what makes this one stand out. And so I guess my overall point is that if you're looking for games that, you're out hunting and you want to find games that you think may shoot up in price and you don't want to have to pay those exorbitant prices, look for games that have a lot of depth. Look for games that tell a very interesting and unique story. And most importantly, buy the stuff that you want to buy, of course. Don't just buy a game because you think it's going to go up in price. Don't let FOMO get you. But if you are hunting and you're like, you're trying to decide, those would be some of the things that I would look for. Look for things that are original. Look for things with an interesting story that you will gravitate towards and that you already like. These are games that I already like. I love me a good hack and slasher, whether it's in 3D or 2D. A beat 'em up I'm always into, and something with a really good story is always interesting to me as well. But I think, that's, that fear, that FOMO comes about when people have to worry about certain physical games shooting up in price. But let me know what you guys think. What do you guys think is the determining factor that makes certain games shoot up in price crazy versus other games? What do you think causes that? And what do you think would be the best way to just kind of avoid having to pay those prices outside of obviously emulation or buying the digital version? Let me know down in the comments and I'll catch you in the next video. It's the Y2K Collector. Take it easy.